Tonight, we will fall asleep to the gentle story of Saint Teresa of Ávila, a woman whose quiet determination, deep inner life, and warm humanity shaped one of the most peaceful and enduring spiritual paths in Christian history. She lived in 16th century Spain, a time of change and tension, a world full of debates, reforms, and new discoveries. Yet in the middle of that restless age, Teresa became a voice of calm. She discovered, within herself, a place of stillness that no noise of the world could disturb. And from that silent center, she lived, wrote, traveled, and touched countless hearts. Her life was not marked by dramatic battles or grand public events. Instead, it unfolded in the rhythm of ordinary days, moments of prayer, small acts of courage, quiet decisions made in the depths of her soul. And it is in these gentle details of a journey that we find a story soft enough to accompany you through the night. So let us begin, slowly, with who she was, and with the quiet world into which she was born. Teresa was born in Ávila in 1515, inside a city surrounded by ancient stone walls that seemed to hold centuries of silence. Her early world was shaped by this atmosphere, a place both strong and peaceful, marked by narrow streets, quiet courtyards, and a sense of deep tradition. It was in this setting that her story began. She belonged to a large and devout family, one that valued education, honesty, and prayer. Her father, Alonso, was a thoughtful, steady man who kept a small library in their home. Books were precious in those days, and the ones he owned were chosen with great care. Writings on virtue, devotion, and noble conduct. Her mother, Beatrice, was gentle and imaginative, a woman whose kindness filled the house with warmth. Teresa often said that her mother taught her to love prayer almost without realizing it, simply through the atmosphere she created. Growing up among many siblings, Teresa learned early how to listen, how to share, and how to live with others in harmony. Yet even in the noise and movement of a busy household, she carried within herself a quiet sensitivity that made her attentive to everything around her. The tone of a voice, the feelings of a friend, the inner movements of her own heart. From a young age, she had an active and vivid imagination. Stories touched her deeply. She and her brother Rodrigo would play at being saints and adventurers, dreaming of heroic deeds and faraway lands. But what inspired her most were the lives of the saints she found in her father's books. These stories stirred her in a way that ordinary tales did not. She sensed, even as a child, that holiness was not something distant or unreachable. It was a path walked by real people, men and women who loved God with sincerity and trusted Him in the small details of life. She was also a girl of strong personality, even if her strength was quiet. Teresa had a natural charm and warmth that made people like her, but she also had a firm will. When she decided something mattered, she held to it with surprising determination. Her gentleness never meant passivity. Her kindness never meant weakness. There was, even in her childhood, a harmony between affection and courage. As she grew, Teresa developed a deep appreciation for the inner world, thoughts, emotions, the movements of the soul. Though she enjoyed conversation and companionship, she also knew how to be still, how to notice the delicate impressions left by experiences that touched her profoundly. These early moments of reflection, even if she did not yet understand them, were preparing her for the spiritual journey she would one day embrace so fully. The child who played in the courtyards of Ávila, who read stories of saints, who felt things intensely and loved with sincerity, this child was already carrying within herself the seeds of the woman she would become. Her later writings would reveal just how important these early years were, a time of innocence, sensitivity, and quiet longing for something deeper than the world around her could offer. As Teresa moved from childhood into young adulthood, her inner world began to deepen. She felt herself drawn toward a life of prayer and closeness to God. Yet she also enjoyed conversation, friendship, and the gentle comforts of ordinary life. These two desires, the longing for God and the affection for the world, often seemed to pull her in different directions. In time, one quiet truth rose above all the others. a steady call toward religious life. When she finally entered the Carmel of the Incarnation in Ávila, she did so with sincere hope, believing that the convent would bring her the peace she had longed for. But the reality she encountered was more complex. The Carmelite life of her time was not as silent or secluded as it would later become. Visitors came and went. Conversation was common, and the structure of the community allowed for a kind of comfortable social life within its walls. For someone as sensitive as Teresa, this environment brought both joy and distraction. The Carmel of the Incarnation, where Teresa lived during these early years, was a large, sprawling building typical of 16th century Spanish convents. The convent grew gradually over time, so its architecture felt almost like a patchwork. Narrow corridors that turned unexpectedly, quiet staircases worn smooth by the footsteps of generations, and small interior patios where light fell softly in the afternoons. The cloistered walkways formed a square of silence, bordered by simple archways. When Teresa walked those halls, she often heard only the distant steps of another sister or the murmur of voices echoing gently through the stone. The heart of the convent was its cloister, a place where the sisters could walk slowly in prayer. At certain hours, the building was filled with stillness, sunlight filtering through wooden shutters, birdsong drifting in from the courtyard, and the faint sound of bells marking the rhythm of the day. Yet at other times, the convent was surprisingly lively. Visitors entered freely, family members arrived with news from the city, and sisters gathered in common rooms to talk. This mix of silence and activity shaped Teresa's early experience of Carmel, a place full of devotion, but also full of distractions that made deep prayer difficult for her young heart. Not long after her entrance, a severe illness changed the course of her life. She fell gravely sick, so gravely that at one point her family and the convent believed she would die. Her body weakened until she could hardly move, and for a time she hovered between life and death. Teresa would later write that this period taught her the fragility of the human condition, the thin line between one breath and the next. She eventually began to recover, but the illness left lasting effects. For a long time, she could barely walk. Her days were filled with suffering, exhaustion, and the slow, uncertain work of healing. This physical limitation created a space of enforced quiet, but it did not immediately lead to spiritual clarity. In fact, these were years marked by inner confusion. Teresa prayed, but often without much feeling. She felt torn between her desire for God and the sound of voices, the comfort of friendships, the daily rhythms of convent life that distracted her from deeper prayer. These became the years of what she later called a long spiritual lukewarmness, a period in which she wanted to pray but avoided it, in which silence felt heavy, and in which she often questioned whether she truly belonged to this life. She struggled with thoughts of leaving the convent altogether. The pressures of family expectations, social ties, and her own desire to be appreciated all weighed on her. It was an internal battle fought quietly, known by almost no one but herself. During what she later called her long years of lukewarmness, Teresa lived with an uncomfortable mixture of desire and hesitation. She wanted to pray, but often postponed it. She longed for closeness with God, yet found herself drawn again and again into conversations, friendships, and small comforts that filled her days. She kept the convent's routine faithfully, but inside she felt divided. In her writings, she described this period as living between two worlds, neither fully given to prayer nor fully at peace in ordinary distractions. The conflict was gentle, but persistent, and it left her feeling restless. There were days when she would kneel to pray and feel nothing at all, only dryness, heaviness, and a sense of distance. On other days, she avoided prayer altogether, fearing the quiet because she sensed it would ask something deeper of her heart. She often compared herself to someone standing at the door of a great treasure, but lacking the courage to enter. This quiet struggle lasted for years and became one of the most honest parts of her story. Looking back, she understood that God was slowly teaching her humility, patience, and the art of returning again and again to prayer, even when her heart felt cold. Yet even in this restless season, something unseen was happening. Beneath the surface of her doubts and fears, a quiet current of grace was slowly working its way into her heart. Teresa would later describe this time as a necessary preparation, a period in which she learned the limits of her own strength and discovered how deeply she relied on God. The turning point came gradually. Moments of prayer that once seemed dry began to open into deeper stillness. Experiences of recollection, brief, gentle movements of the soul toward God, touched her with a simplicity she had not known before. She began to understand that prayer was not a matter of forcing herself into devotion, but of opening her heart to a presence already there. What had been a long struggle slowly became a path toward deep prayer, a prayer rooted not in effort but in surrender. This change would shape the rest of her life, guiding her into the mystical journey for which she is now remembered. But before she could rise to that place of clarity, she had to live through the shadows, the illness, the temptations, the questions, and the long, slow work of rediscovering her own soul. As Teresa continued to grow in prayer, something within her began to settle into a deeper stillness. What once felt like effort slowly became recollection, a quiet turning of the soul toward God that drew her gently inward. She spoke of these early graces with great humility, describing them not as dramatic events but as moments of peace, quiet, and loving awareness, where the presence of God felt closer than her own breath. These experiences deepened over time. Periods of prayer that began in silence would expand into what she called union, a state in which her thoughts, worries, and distractions faded into a sense of calm belonging. There was no noise in it, no force, no effort, only a soft certainty that God was near. Teresa insisted that these moments were gifts, not achievements, and that they were given only to draw her into greater simplicity and love. Among these experiences, one stands out because Teresa herself described it with careful, reverent detail. The encounter with the angel holding a small, shining dart. In her writings, she explained it delicately, emphasizing not pain, but a warmth and tenderness that touched the deepest part of her soul. She understood this moment as a symbol, a quiet reminder that true love of God is something that transforms from within, not through grand gestures, but through a steady openness of heart. She shared this story only out of obedience, never out of pride, and always with the insistence that such experiences were far less important than humility, charity, and daily faithfulness. These graces eventually brought Teresa a new clarity, the sense that God was calling her to a life of greater simplicity, a life that returned to the original spirit of Carmel, silence, prayer, poverty, and loving community. The convent she lived in was full of good people, but its customs had become relaxed. Frequent visitors, social interactions, and worldly concerns made it hard for the sisters to live the quiet, contemplative life they desired. Moved by this insight, Teresa began to imagine something new, a small convent, poor and peaceful, where the sisters could live as a family centered entirely on prayer. It was a bold idea, and not everyone supported it at first. But Teresa's quiet determination and trust in God carried her through. In 1562, after many struggles, she founded the first house of the Carmelite reform, the convent of Saint Joseph. The community lived in true simplicity, no luxuries, very little space, and a daily rhythm shaped by silence, prayer, and sisterly affection. For Teresa, this was not a return to severity, but to authenticity. She believed that a heart at peace needed very little, and that joy could flourish even in the smallest and humblest of places. What makes this period remarkable is not only Teresa's spiritual insight, but also her strength and humor. She faced criticism, misunderstandings, and practical difficulties, yet she often responded with warmth and wit. She joked about her own flaws, spoke kindly to her opponents, and kept an astonishing calmness through every challenge. Her serenity was not natural ease. It was the fruit of prayer, rooted in trust. It was also during this time that she met a young Carmelite friar who would become one of her closest collaborators, Saint John of the Cross. His own longing for silence and depth aligned perfectly with Teresa's vision, and together they shaped the renewal of the Carmelite order. Their friendship was grounded in respect, spiritual clarity, and a shared desire for a life centered entirely on God. This period, marked by mystical grace, clarity of purpose, new foundations, and enduring friendships, became the heart of Teresa's mission. It was not loud or public, but it transformed her life and the lives of countless others, guiding her toward the quiet strength that would define her legacy. Once the first Reformed convent was established, Teresa thought her work might settle into a quiet rhythm. Instead, it opened the door to one of the most active and surprising chapters of her life. For many years, she traveled across Spain, moving along dusty roads, riding in uncomfortable wagons, and staying in simple inns, all to found new Carmelite houses grounded in silence, simplicity, and prayer. These journeys, which might sound exhausting in modern times, were even more challenging in the 16th century. Roads were rough, weather was unpredictable, and travel was slow. Yet Teresa moved with a sense of calm purpose. She approached each journey not as a burden, but as a continuation of the mission she believed God had entrusted to her. Whether she was crossing mountains, dealing with delays, or facing unexpected obstacles, she carried an interior peace that steadied those around her. Part of what made Teresa so remarkable was her practical and affectionate personality. Though she lived a profoundly spiritual life, she was grounded, observant, and realistic. She managed finances, negotiated property agreements, and organized communities with a natural skill that surprised even her closest companions. She could comfort a sister, settle a disagreement, or solve a logistical problem with the same calm clarity she brought to prayer. Those who knew her often spoke of her warmth, her sense of humor, and her ability to make others feel understood. During these years of travel and foundation, Teresa produced the writings that would become the heart of her spiritual legacy. She wrote not as a scholar, but as a guide, someone who had walked the path herself and wanted to help others find peace in the depths of their own souls. Her book, The Life, or the Book of Her Life, offers a gentle narrative of her early experiences, her struggles, and the beginnings of her journey into deep prayer. It is an honest and intimate work, full of humility and insight. Her Way of Perfection was written for the sisters in her Reformed communities. In its pages, she speaks with tenderness and clarity about prayer, charity, patience, and the simple practices that help a soul grow closer to God. It reflects her desire to teach without pressure, to encourage rather than command. And then there is her masterpiece, The Interior Castle, a rich and poetic description of the spiritual journey as a castle filled with many rooms. Teresa guides the reader gently from the outer rooms, where distractions are strong, to the deep inner chambers, where the soul rests in quiet union with God. Even for those unfamiliar with mystical language, the book offers a sense of calm and beauty, inviting the reader to see prayer not as effort but as an intimate friendship. Teresa never saw herself as a writer. She often said she wrote only because she was asked to do so, and even then she approached the task with humility, humor, and a certain reluctance. Her writing did not come from quiet hours at a polished desk. Much of it was done in the midst of everyday responsibilities, answering letters, caring for the sisters, managing the foundations, and dealing with the practical details that filled her days. She wrote in small moments of pause, at a table in a simple room, with a quill and ink, often in less than ideal conditions. Sometimes she had to stop because someone knocked at the door, or because her hands trembled from fatigue. Yet despite all of this, her words flowed with clarity and gentleness, carrying the unmistakable tone of someone who wrote straight from the heart. When she composed the Book of Her Life, Teresa was not trying to produce a spiritual classic. She was simply recounting her own journey in obedience to those guiding her soul. Her description of God's activity in her life is marked not by self-importance, but by sincerity. She wrote openly about her struggles, her doubts, and her gradual transformation. The book reveals the interior movements of her soul with a simplicity rare even among saints. She wanted her readers, mostly confessors and spiritual directors, to understand her experiences honestly, without exaggeration. The result is a narrative that feels both vulnerable and peaceful, full of quiet moments that shaped her relationship with God. Her Way of Perfection was written especially for the sisters of the first Reformed convents. Teresa approached this book like a mother or an older sister writing from experience, offering practical advice, gentle encouragement, and a warm understanding of human weakness. She taught that prayer requires patience rather than pressure, trust rather than control. Her reflections on humility, charity, and detachment come not from theory, but from her daily life with the sisters, the conversations they shared, the challenges they faced, and the love that held them together. The book feels like a quiet conversation at the end of the day, spoken by someone who wants only to help others find peace. Her greatest work, The Interior Castle, came later, when her spiritual insight had matured into a deep, steady light. In this book, she outlined the journey of the soul as a magnificent castle made of a single diamond, with many rooms leading inward toward God. Though the imagery is rich, the tone remains gentle and accessible. She was not trying to impress but to illuminate, guiding readers step by step through the stages of prayer and union. The beauty of the book lies not only in its mystical vision but in its steadiness, a quiet confidence that God waits for every soul with tenderness and patience. Teresa wrote it quickly, inspired and focused, yet without haste. Every page reflects a desire to help others discover the peace she had found. Across all her writings, Teresa held one simple intention: to help others find rest in God. She knew the struggles of prayer, the weight of distractions, and the pain of feeling far from the divine. Because she lived these experiences herself, her words carry unusual warmth. Her books do not pressure or demand, they invite. They encourage readers to move at a natural pace, to trust that spiritual growth unfolds gradually, and to remember that God leads each soul with gentleness. This is why her writings still console people today. They offer a safe, steady path toward inner peace. Across all her writings, one message shines consistently: the power of gentleness, humility, and intimate friendship with God. Teresa never encouraged harshness with oneself or others. Instead, she urged her readers to be patient, to trust the slow work of grace, and to approach prayer with honesty and affection. Her relationships with her Carmelite sisters reflect this same spirit. She guided them with kindness, knowing their strengths and weaknesses, comforting them in moments of discouragement, and reminding them that joy was not incompatible with holiness. Her connection with her spiritual directors, including Saint John of the Cross and other learned men of her time, was marked by mutual respect and a shared desire for true interior peace. Even in the midst of constant travel and demanding responsibilities, Teresa found ways to keep her heart at rest. She believed deeply in the importance of quiet moments, even brief ones, where the soul could breathe and remember God's presence. In her letters, she often encouraged others to pause, to rest, and to let God's love reach them gently. For her, prayer was not escape from work, but its anchor, the stillness that allowed her to move through a busy life with balance and serenity. These years of foundation, writing, and guidance were not easy, but they were filled with meaning. And through them all, Teresa carried the same quiet certainty that peace is found not in the noise of the world, but in the quiet places of the heart. As the years passed, the constant rhythm of travel, foundation, and guidance began to weigh gently on Teresa's body. She remained active for as long as she could, visiting her communities, encouraging her sisters, and helping to shape the future of the Carmelite reform. But her body, once resilient despite illness and fatigue, gradually grew more fragile. The journeys that had once filled her days became harder, and every mile traveled carried a deeper sense of effort. Still, even as her physical strength waned, Teresa's inner serenity only grew stronger. She often wrote about the peace she felt in trusting God completely, a peace that did not depend on health or circumstances. This quiet confidence accompanied her through her final travels, especially during her last journey to the small town of Ávila de Tormes, where one of her convents had been founded. It was there, in Ávila de Tormes, the Teresa sensed her life was approaching its end. Her sisters surrounded her with affection and reverence, witnessing the same calmness that had marked her entire spiritual path. Teresa faced her final days with simplicity, gratitude, and a deep awareness that her life, with all its struggles, joys, and labors, belonged entirely to God. When the moment came, she passed away gently, leaving behind not a dramatic scene, but the quiet death of someone who had lived in friendship with God until her last breath. After her passing, the impact of a life began to unfold in ways she could never have imagined. Her writings, once meant primarily for the sisters of her own communities, spread far beyond the walls of the convent she founded. People from every part of society, scholars, priests, mothers, seekers, and ordinary believers, found in her words a path toward peace, honesty, and inner freedom. She spoke a spiritual language that transcended time, one that touched the heart with both clarity and tenderness. Over the centuries, Teresa's influence only grew. Her teachings reached beyond Spain, beyond the Carmelite order, and eventually throughout the world. The depth of her insight, the beauty of her spirituality, and the humanity of her voice earned her a place among the great teachers of Christian tradition. In 1970, the Church formally recognized what countless readers had already discovered. Teresa of Ávila was named a Doctor of the Church, one of the first women ever to receive this title. What makes Teresa's legacy especially meaningful for the modern world is how timeless her message remains. She lived in an age of noise, conflict, and pressure, not unlike our own. Yet she discovered a way to remain centered, peaceful, and connected to what truly matters. Her teachings remind us that prayer is not reserved for the perfect, but for the honest, not for those who escape life, but for those who live it with openness and trust. In her writings and in her life, Teresa leaves us a simple invitation to slow down, to look within, and to remember that peace is found not in the rush of the world, but in the quiet, loving presence of God. As this quiet story draws to its close, we return to the gentle presence of Saint Teresa of Ávila, the woman who walked through illness, doubt, responsibility, and long journeys with a heart anchored in peaceful trust. Her life began in the stone-walled city of Ávila, unfolded in the quiet rooms of the Carmel, and blossomed into a mission that carried her across the roads of Spain. Through every stage, her journey remained the same at its core, a slow and steady discovery of God's presence within her own soul. She taught that prayer does not require perfection, only honesty. That peace does not come from escaping the world, but from welcoming God in the middle of it. And that friendship with God grows through small acts of love lived quietly, day after day. Tonight, as her story settles in your mind like a soft echo, you can carry with you one simple image: Teresa, calm and smiling, sitting with her sisters in the silence of evening, trusting that God is near and that all things are held in His gentle care. May this peaceful memory accompany you now, bringing a sense of rest, warmth, and quietness at the end of this day. Good night.